Hey YouTube, Davo again. Today I'm going to talk about tuning problems. If you're coming here and watching this video, you're having some tuning issues, and that can be very frustrating. I mean, there's nothing worse than not being able to play or practice because you just can't get the guitar to stay in tune. You know, it's very frustrating, and I'm sure a lot of potentially good guitar players have just given up playing guitar altogether because of this thing. So I want to talk about that and what I feel about that. Number one, I think 60 to 70% of the time that you have a tuning problem, whether it be a cheapy guitar or a top of the line Gibson or a Fender or whatever, the main problem that you're probably going to have is this: your nut. They're just not properly made most of the time. They stick a cheap piece of plastic in there, and they're all, you know, probably cut exactly the same, and they just throw it in there. So the problems that can arise from that is the strings get pinched, if you will, in there. They're squeezed because they're cut so tightly, and what happens, you know, you bend a note down here. Well, when you release it, you know, you pulled the string this far. When you release it, it's still pinched right there. So when you go to play that string, it's going to be flat. You know, the pitch will be lower, and so you'll be like, crap, I'm out of tune. And so you start turning this, and you hear a creak, and then all of a sudden it's way sharp. You know, it's being pinched right there, and there's no lubrication, there's no give in it. You know, it's being squeezed in there. Les Pauls and things like that, they have, you know, 3 on a side, and you'll notice that when they come out of there, they come out at an angle, and that creates another place to bind. You know, it's pinched there, plus it's at an angle. So that gives it another opportunity to just get stuck in the nut. One option is to, you know, have it, you know, have your nut properly cut. You know, if it's bone or ivory or just regular plastic, to you know, actually file it with the little micro files to be correctly. Little drawing here I did, and this is my opinion, but if it's going to be cut properly, I think the least amount that the string sits in the nut itself, the better. Obviously, you want it in there enough to where when you do a bend or something like that, it isn't jumping out. But like here on the E string, I like it just a little bit less than halfway in the nut. That way it's less surface area touching the nut. That way it doesn't have an opportunity to get caught in there as well. As you go down the line, you're going to need to have a little more and more of it in there to keep it from flying off. But I also think that hurts sustain. I mean, having that stuff touching the side of the string as well. I mean, when you fret the note down here, you know, it's just touching the bottom of the string there on the metal, and you get the purest tone right there. But up here you got plastic touching the sides of it. I mean, you know, you might start getting a sitar sound out of that. So I think, you know, having the least amount of it in there is a good thing for it to be. And there's plenty of people out there that can cut it properly. I've seen people talk about, I mean, if you just don't have the money or have the time, or you're at a gig, of taking, like, popping the high E string out of there, you loosen it up, popping it out, grabbing the B string, sticking it over in the high E string slot, you know, and that widens it out a little bit, and that'll get you through, you know. And you do that all the way down the line, you know, pop them out and put them over in there, wiggle them a little bit so there's less binding. Also, you take the graphite from a pencil is another thing I've seen done, and I've done myself, to keep it lubricated, so that when you bend and the strings, you know, naturally slide back and forth in there. They're lubricated somewhat, so that'll help you. You can also, and what I've done with this particular guitar, there's a company called Graphtec, and they make nuts that are, I guess they're their own recipe, proprietary crap, but they're self-lubricating, so you don't ever have to put graphite on them. And I put it on this Telecaster, and I can't tell you how many times I've played on Saturday. I've worked all week, hadn't had a chance to touch it. I come back in Friday, I pick this thing up out of the case, strum it, it's in tune. It stays in tune. I can bend and do crazy stuff all night. If I show up, if I get there early enough, set the guitar up and let it get acclimated to the room, get it used to the temperature and humidity in that room, and then I tune it there, I could probably make it through the whole night almost without tuning this thing. It might be a little bit out or something, but I could get through. But it wasn't like that before. This is a Mexican-made Fender, obviously, a deluxe, a Nashville Deluxe, made in Mexico. And I've made several changes to it, and that being one of them. And it's turned into a really good guitar. And I'd recommend getting the Mexican-made Fenders, because just little upgrades, and you can have you a really good guitar. So yeah, the nut is a Graphtec nut, and it's inexpensive. So if you're having tuning issues, and there's a 60% chance it's your nut, and you can get a new one for $11, $12 I think is what I paid for that nut, then go there. You'll never regret changing your nut. It can only help. If you have something like a Stratocaster or something with a Bigsby or some wiggly bit down here, they make, like LSR makes a roller nut, and it's like ball bearings or some such that it creates less friction, and I haven't tried it with the Graphtec. I can't recommend it because I haven't tried it, but I'd say from what I know of this and being able to bend and all that and stay in tune, I'd say it would be just fine as well. So it does change your tone a little bit. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. I guess it's to your own ear, but I figured it would sound pretty much like it does down here. Because the frets are metal, and so having a metal nut, I'd say it would just kind of maybe even up the tone, really. But it may not be what your ear is used to or wants to hear. So, with that covered, I want to talk about string trees. And string trees are these little guys up here. Usually there's, sometimes there's two of these things, but this one only has one. The purpose for these are to hold the strings underneath, to keep an angle on this nut right here, and that keeps those strings from popping out. If that wasn't there, the strings would be too high and want to come out of there, and that would, that's not helpful. You can avoid string trees altogether if you put more windings on these lower strings and wind it all the way close down to the headstock itself. That'll help you out with that, and you can eliminate them altogether. What I've done, I took off the one that came originally on it, which is the ones that come on all cheaper Fender electric guitars, and anything like them, and I put the American made style on there. And it, this is another thing that is probably $5-6, maybe. It wasn't any more than $20 or something, and that'll help your tuning as well. And let me explain why the other ones suck so bad. Here I got a drawing. Right here is the cheapy one. Reason it sucks is it's pretty much like a teeter-totter. See, your strings are going to go here. Let's say that's your high E string, and that's your B string. We'll say your high E string is a little flat. So you go up there and you tighten it up, you get it to pitch. What it's doing, it's raising this side up because you got more tension on it and pushing this side down. So you're already affecting the tuning on your B string. So, in that situation, how can you get it in tune? I mean, you just have to keep turning until they balance each other out. And then when you do a bend on one, it's going to affect the other. I mean, because this is just a little plastic piece right here, and this is a little, piece of metal and a screw. So they basically, I mean, literally built a teeter-totter to put there, and it's useless, The American-made ones, they're a solid piece of little metal. And, the strings go under there, right there. And this is screwed, well, you won't be able to see it probably, but it's, screwed down into the wood. It can't wiggle like that. It's, it's a solid piece of the guitar, once you've screwed it into the guitar. So there's no teeter-totter action, and the tuning of one string does not affect the tuning of the other. So I recommend, if your guitar has string trees, get something more solid, more substantial. Intonation is very essential, and if you don't know, intonation is basically adjusting your bridge so that the whole guitar is in tune. And what I mean by that is, if you play, a bar chord up here and then slide it down to here at the octave, it should be all the same notes and in pitch. It just basically making the distance from here to here, the 12th fret, the same as from the 12th fret to the bridge, ensuring that every little interval of these frets they put on there is equal and where they should be. Some of the cheaper manufacturers of guitars, the frets may not be as accurate, so they didn't take as much care putting these frets exactly where they need to be, so there might be some tuning problems inherent to your guitar that nothing short of a fret job would be able to fix. And if it is a cheaper guitar, then a fret job would probably be more expensive than you'd want to spend on it anyhow. Like if it's a bolt-on neck, you might be able to buy you a better neck from a reputable company, or a replacement fender neck, or whomever. Adjusting intonation, you do that down here at the bridge. There are, dozens and thousands probably of different styles of bridges. This is like a typical Telecaster style. Obviously, I replaced this from the original one that came with it. It had 6 saddles, whereas this has 3. I prefer the sound of these thicker brass saddles. It gives it, to me, a twangier, beefier sound, which I like. These, however, are compensated, and when I say compensated, that means that they've cut angles and grooves in these so that the string hits them in the correct spot to ensure intonation at the 12th fret, because having a straight line down here of them will not get you in tune. Each string requires a different amount of distance because of the shape of the string and any number of factors. But so these are compensated, and they're filed in different ways. Before compensated, the 3 barrels, you'd have to bend the screw and do all kinds of crazy things to get your intonation close. So now they've fixed that, and I have no intonation problems with this particular one. This is a Wilkinson bridge. I got it for maybe $25. So that was a vast improvement. And I've made other modifications to this guitar. I'll maybe do a review or just talk about what I've done to it in a later video. But those are the main things that are going to affect your tuning and intonation. And maybe all you need is to replace the nut. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I mean, because that is going to cause trouble. If that's not something you've addressed or looked at, take care of that first. That's the cheapest route you can go, in my opinion, and that might take care of everything. So that could help you out. You will have trouble with some tuning, the cheaper tuning gears. But try this first. I mean, you'll never regret it. Um, the tuning gears, they can be a problem, but you can get some inexpensive ones that'll do the job for you. You just have to go out there and do some reviews, look at some reviews, and see what everybody's buying, what everybody recommends. I have nothing to recommend. These came on the guitar, and I have no problem with them at all. I'd say most of the time the ones that come on your guitar are decent. It's the other things that are causing trouble. Real quick, I mean, having the height of the strings. I mean, if they're sitting, way up high down here, and your neck's not properly adjusted, the distance that you have to press that string down to reach that fret is going to affect, that overall distance and your intonation. You can't get it correct if it's that far off. You want it, and plus it won't be playable. But these are all factors you need to consider with your guitar. But I'm pretty sure just about any guitar you get, you'll be able to fix, at least get by if changing just a few things, and all these things I mentioned you can get for probably under $50. The nud, string tree, even a new bridge if it comes to that. You can get all that under $50 and have something that'll stay in tune and that you can practice on and learn songs and make money on. So hopefully I have enlightened you a little bit and solved some of your tuning issues. So make sure you rate the video, subscribe so you can watch more stuff when I bring it out, and make sure you make some comments. I want to know what you think and what I'm doing. If it's right or wrong, let me know, and I'll see you next time.